Imagine, just for a second, that you are literally free falling from an airplane. You've got this bag of parachute parts, right? And you pull out the instruction manual to figure out how to put it together before you hit the ground.
Which is a terrifying scenario, by the way.
Totally terrifying, but instead of like step-by-step schematics, the manual is written like a sweeping, dramatic novel about a lumberjack building a log cabin in the woods. So you're skimming the paragraphs, searching for the climax, hoping to find out how the story resolves.
Right, you're completely ignoring the structural logic of the text because you're panicking.
Exactly, and if you do that, you are going to crash.
It sounds absurd, but according to the fascinating snack of sources we are jumping into today, that is exactly what most of us are doing when we try to read ancient texts.
Yeah, it really is a profound category error. I mean, we take incredibly complex historical literature, which was, designed to guide human behavior and shape entire societies, and we read it using the completely wrong set of expectations. We crash because we don't understand the architecture of what we're looking at. Well, welcome to the deep dive. It is Wednesday, March 25, 2026, and today we are talking directly to you, the learner.
Glad to be here, and I'm really excited about this stack of sources.
Same here. We have been handed this comprehensive stack of guides on a methodology known as Inductive Bible Study, and our goal today is to extract the ultimate blueprint for reading ancient texts so you can, pull actual tangible life transformation out of them.
Right, without feeling completely buried by the sheer complexity of the literature.
Yes, exactly. So, to start, the foundation of this entire inductive method rests on a very rigid, universal three-step architecture. Regardless of what you are reading, the sequence never changes.
Right, it's always the same 3 steps. Step 1 is observation. That's where you gather the raw facts by just asking, what do I actually see here?
Just the fact.
Just the facts. Then, step 2 is interpretation, where you draw the blueprint and ask, what does this mean? And finally, step 3 is application, where you construct the building by asking, what should change in response to this?
Okay, let's unpack this because it sounds incredibly straightforward when you lay it out like that. Observe the facts, interpret the meaning, apply the lesson.
It is straightforward in theory, sure, but the execution is where the modern reader completely derails.
Oh, totally.
Because while those 3 overarching steps are universal, the sources we are looking at draw a massive, heavy line between the different types of literature contained within these ancient libraries.
You can't just treat a historical library as one monolithic block of text.
Exactly. To survive the process, you must first understand the fundamental nature of the specific genre sitting right in front of you.
And the sources focus heavily on 2 dominant contrasting genres, right? Biblical narratives and didactic literature.
Yeah, let's look at narratives first, because they are the sweeping, dramatic stories that take up massive portions of the text. Take the story of Naaman from 2 Kings 5, which is highlighted heavily in our guides.
Oh, right, the Syrian commander.
Yes, Naaman is this highly decorated, wealthy Syrian military commander who contracts leprosy. He travels across enemy lines into Israel, seeking a cure from a prophet. It is a story loaded with geopolitical Cold War tension, rich character dynamics, and profound plot twists.
But the author of that story doesn't pause the narrative to hand you a nice little bulleted list of moral takeaways.
Never. Narratives show rather than tell. The meaning is entirely stealthy.
Stealthy, I like that.
Yeah, it hides beneath the surface structure of the plot and the actions of the characters. I mean, the author expects you to watch this proud pagan general interact with lowly, faithful servants and draw the theological conclusions yourself.
Based on who experiences divine grace and who doesn't. But then you flip over to didactic literature, which honestly feels like stepping onto another planet. We are talking about the epistles, the letters written by figures like Paul, books like Romans or Ephesians.
Right, there's no plot there.
None. There are no characters going on a sweeping geopolitical journey. It is pure, concentrated instruction. You are looking at dense walls of text, massive run-on sentences, and highly structured, logical, theological arguments.
Yeah, it's the ancient equivalent of a highly technical, airtight legal brief. Or, an instruction manual.
But I have to push back here, just a little. These texts are bound in the exact same historical library. They often sit right next to each other. Reading is reading. Why can't I just use the same approach for both? I mean, I read the Naaman story to learn about God, and I read Paul's letters to learn about God.
Because that approach is a recipe for cognitive crash. This is exactly where your parachute analogy comes into play.
Oh, right.
If you try to read a dense didactic instruction manual like it's a breezy dramatic narrative,
Yeah.
you're going to skim right over the vital structural logic.
Because we want the story.
What's fascinating here is our human biology actually fights against us in this process. Our brains are naturally wired for stories. We crave the ease and flow of a narrative arc. We naturally track heroes, villains, and plot resolution.
I just want to know what happens next.
We do. But when we hit a wall of didactic instruction like a complex theological argument loaded with ancient syntax and conditional clauses, our brains essentially short-circuit.
We just get tired.
Total cognitive exhaustion. The immediate biological impulse is to abandon the heavy lifting, skim to the end of the chapter, find a quick motivational quote that sounds vaguely inspiring, and just move on.
Wait, so if I try to use my brain's default narrative setting on a didactic text, I am essentially looking for characters and plot in a document that has neither. I'm searching for a ghost.
You are searching for something that isn't there, and you are entirely missing the highly structured argument that is there. This is why the inductive method demands that we use completely different toolkits to execute the observation and interpretation steps, depending on the genre.
Let's do a brief flyover of these specific toolkits, just to understand the mechanics of how we navigate this without getting bogged down. When you are observing a narrative, the sources suggest your toolkit should make you act like a crime scene investigator.
Right, a CSI. A CSI doesn't walk into a room, glance at a broken window, and instantly declare the motive.
They'd be a terrible CSI if they did.
Exactly. They meticulously measure the space. So in a narrative, you map the setting, noting the geopolitical tension between Syria and Israel, for example. You catalog the characters, paying attention to the sharp contrasts.
Like the powerful but diseased general versus the captive, powerless servant girl.
Yes, exactly. She holds the answer to his healing. You are tracing the plot objectively before you ever attempt to solve the meaning.
You were just measuring the angles of the room, and then to interpret that narrative, you switch to what the guides call the trace framework. Tension, reversal, actions, contrasts, and ending.
Right. You act as the detective looking at the CSI's evidence board, hunting for the exact turning point in the story that flips the tension on its head.
But if you take that detective toolkit into a didactic text, it is completely useless.
Completely. There is no setting to map and no plot to trace. So for didactic observation, you deploy the RRR framework. You scan the text looking for repeated words, which basically serve as the ancient equivalent of a neon highlighter pointing out the author's main theme.
Okay, repeated words. What's the rest?
Then you look for ARR, admonitions, reasons, and results.
How does that actually look in practice?
So if a didactic letter says, put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes, the admonition, the command is put on armor.
Got it.
The reason, the divine logic behind the command is so that you can stand. You are tracking the skeletal structure of the argument. And the final R is related links, where you spot comparisons and contrasts within the logic.
Okay, and to interpret that didactic skeleton, your primary tools are context and syntax. You map the surrounding neighborhood of the paragraph to ensure you aren't isolating a single sentence out of its environment.
Yes, context is key.
And you follow the grammatical road signs, connector words like therefore, so that, or but.
It is a vastly different mechanical process.
I love the visualization of this. It's like having one master blueprint for building a house. That blueprint is our 3 steps: observe, interpret, apply. But if you are building a log cabin, which represents our narrative, you use a chainsaw to cut the broad strokes.
Right.
And if you are building a brick house, our didactic text, you use a trowel to carefully lay down the syntax brick by brick. It is the exact same 3-step architecture, but you must use vastly different tools for vastly different materials.
That structural discipline is crucial, because regardless of whether you are holding a chainsaw or a trowel, the source material warns of a massive, universally human pitfall.
Oh yeah, the trap.
No matter the genre, human nature desperately, instinctively wants to skip step 2, interpretation, and jump straight into step 3, application.
Because we hate interpretation. It is slow, it's tedious, and it requires cognitive endurance. We want to skip the heavy lifting, grab a hammer, and just start swinging at our own lives to fix our immediate problems.
This is the danger of the deductive trap. We naturally read deductively rather than inductively.
Explain that difference real quick.
Sure. Reading deductively means starting with our own feelings, our own assumptions, or a predetermined conclusion, and then scanning the ancient text, hunting for a verse to validate what we already feel.
So, if I'm feeling stressed about a big project at work, I approach the text deductively by hunting for a sentence about military victory, and I appropriate it for my Tuesday morning staff meeting.
Exactly. You force the text to serve your emotional state. The inductive method, the one we were outlining today, forces the exact opposite. You let the raw facts of the text drive the conclusion, entirely independent of your modern anxieties.
When we skip that interpretive step, we fall into what the sources describe as the narcissism of bad reading. We constantly make ourselves the center of the story.
We really do.
If we skip interpretation in the name and narrative, we take this staggering cosmic drama about an enemy general discovering unmerited divine grace, and we turn it into a primitive medical procedural.
Right, because Naaman washes in the Jordan River and is healed. A modern reader, skipping the interpretation step, maps themselves directly onto the main character.
They literally conclude, I guess my application for today is to take more baths when I'm feeling sick.
It sounds silly, but it happens constantly.
We make these profound ancient words nothing more than a cheap mirror for our modern biases. We shrink the universe down to the size of our own personal self-improvement goals.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, preventing that interpretive narcissism requires a relentless pursuit of authorial intent.
Authorial intent.
Yes, we have to discover what the original author actually meant to communicate to the original audience in their specific historical context before we dare ask what it means for us today.
The sources actually provide a highly practical traffic light tool for when we get stuck trying to find that authorial intent, just to keep us grounded in the text itself.
Yeah, the traffic light is great. When you are stuck trying to interpret a passage, the green light is translation comparison. Look at a few different English versions to see if a shift in phrasing illuminates the meaning.
And if you're still stuck?
If you are still stuck, you move to the yellow light, which means proceed with caution. This is where you check historical backgrounds or cross-references. But the strict rule of the yellow light is that historical background illuminates the text. It never controls the text.
Like, knowing the ancient Near Eastern geography of Syria is helpful context for Naaman's journey, but it shouldn't override the plain meaning of the narrative in front of you.
Exactly. The text is always king. Finally, you reach the red light, the absolute last resort. Commentaries.
Wait, last resort?
Yes. The methodology warns to use expert commentaries last to avoid anchoring bias. If you read a famous scholar's opinion before you observe the text yourself, your brain will subconsciously anchor to their interpretation.
Wow, so you become entirely blind to what the text actually says, and you only see what the scholar told you to see.
Precisely. You outsource the interpretation.
Okay, so let's assume we have safely navigated the traffic light. We've observed carefully using our genre-specific toolkits. We've interpreted faithfully to find that authorial intent. We finally arrive at the ultimate shared destination for all genres. Step 3. Application.
This is where the stakes reach their peak. The sources are uncompromising here. Knowledge without obedience doesn't just leave you in a neutral state. It actively leads to spiritual and personal stagnation.
They highlight a psychological phenomenon that is, frankly, devastatingly accurate: the dopamine trap.
Oh, this is fascinating.
When we read a profound truth or finally deconstruct a deep theological insight using our trowel, our brain hits us with a rush of dopamine. We feel incredibly inspired. We trick ourselves into feeling like we've actually grown simply because we comprehended something complex.
We confuse the feeling of inspiration with the reality of transformation.
It's the fitness manual analogy from the guides. You can purchase the most advanced, scientifically rigorous workout manual on the planet. You can memorize the biomechanics of a deadlift, highlight the chapters on nutrition, quote, the dietary guidelines to your friends at dinner,
But if you close the book and never actually pick up a barbell,
or change what you eat, you aren't any healthier. In fact, you're probably just more miserable because now you know exactly what you are failing to do.
that accumulated unapplied truth builds up a tolerance. You become numb to the very insights that were meant to change you. To prevent this stagnation, the inductive framework requires crossing what it calls the bridge from then to now.
The bridge.
Yeah, you take the historical meaning, that authorial intent you discovered in step 2, extract the timeless truth from it, and bring that timeless principle into your modern reality.
To figure out what that application actually looks like on the modern side of the bridge, they use a diagnostic acronym: SPECK.
S-P-E-C-K? S-P-E-C-K.
It gives you 5 specific lenses to look through to find an application hook. S stands for sins to avoid. P is promises to claim. E is examples to follow. C is commands to obey. And K is knowledge of God.
Rotating through those lenses ensures you never walk away from a text empty-handed. But the framework is ruthless about how you structure that takeaway. The application must be relentlessly measurable.
Measurable.
Yes. You must answer two fundamental questions. What exactly will I do, and when exactly will I do it?
So writing "I will be more patient" in your journal is a fuzzy application. It's a nice sentiment, but it's doomed to fail because it lacks architecture.
Right.
A measurable application is tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. when my kids are running late for school, I will use a calm voice instead of shouting.
See, that creates a specific behavioral trigger and a measurable outcome.
But I have to ask the obvious question here on behalf of the listener. Does finding a timeless truth always mean we have to go out and complete a highly demanding, measurable 10-step to-do list every single time we read? Because if I have to invent a physical action for every paragraph of ancient text I study, I mean, I am going to burn out by Thursday.
That is a massive modern misconception, honestly, born out of our hyper-productive culture. We naturally assume application must always equal physical sweat or behavioral modification.
Because we want to be doing something.
Exactly. But the methodology clarifies that application actually comes in four distinct categories: belief, attitude, action, and worship.
Let's unpack those, because that completely shifts the paradigm of what it means to apply something.
Action is what we just discussed, the tangible behavior change, like speaking calmly to your kids. But belief asks, what must I understand to be true about the world or about human nature based on this text?
Okay, an internal shift.
Right. Attitude asks, where do I need an internal posture shift? Perhaps moving from arrogance to vulnerability. And worship asks, how should I respond in sheer awe to who God is revealed to be in this passage?
The sources use this brilliant, priceless painting analogy for this. Imagine you are reading a passage of literature that is utterly majestic, like a text that reveals unmerited grace or divine sovereignty on a cosmic scale.
Yeah.
Its primary purpose might just be to drop you to your knees in awe. That is the intended application. If you take that breathtaking passage and violently try to extract a 10-step self-help plan from it, you are trying to use a priceless painting as a hammer. You destroy the painting, and you don't even fix the wall.
Wow, yes. It is a profound misuse of the text. You must not force behavioral action where the text is calling for awe, deep understanding, or an internal shift in belief.
Yeah.
Application is a multidimensional response, not just a chore list.
Pulling all of this together to synthesize our deep dive today, whether you are navigating the stealthy geopolitical drama of a biblical narrative or slowly deconstructing the dense structural logic of a didactic letter, the path to true understanding remains the same.
You cannot skip the steps.
You cannot skip them. You observe carefully, using the right tools for the right genre. You interpret faithfully to find the original author's intent, and you apply wisely, crossing the bridge, to find a measurable, appropriate response, whether that response is a physical action, a shift in belief, or simply standing in awe of a priceless painting.
This raises an important question regarding the urgency of everything we've discussed today. I want to look at the biological imperative of application.
Oh, the neuroscience stuff.
Yeah. There is a well-documented concept in neuroscience known as neuroplasticity. When you are reading and you suddenly learn a new truth or gain a profound insight, you aren't just experiencing a fleeting thought. Your brain physically forms a new, fragile neural pathway.
So we are talking about a literal physical alteration in the brain's cellular architecture.
Yes. But the biological catch is that this new pathway is incredibly fragile. If you do not act on that insight, if you don't apply the truth, change your behavior, or genuinely shift your attitude, your brain eventually deems that new neural pathway useless.
Because you aren't using it.
Right. And it physically prunes it away to conserve energy. Use it or lose it isn't just a motivational cliche, it is cellular biology. If you delay your obedience or postpone your application, your inaction literally erases the insight from your mind.
Obedience postponed is obedience lost. Wow. It really makes you look at the display shelf of your own mind a little differently. We all have that internal shelf where we place those profound, highlight-worthy truths that we've nodded at recently but completely failed to act on.
Yeah, and based on this methodology, the clock is literally ticking on our brain's neural pathways.
Biology demands immediate participation with the truth. So, to you, the learner listening right now, take a look at your own display shelf. Identify just one piece of knowledge you've been procrastinating on. What is your highly specific, measurable action for the next 24 hours?
What are you going to do before your brain literally erases the insight and prunes that connection forever?
Exactly. Thank you so much for bringing such an incredible, challenging stack of sources to the deep dive today. We started by talking about the danger of using the wrong manual while free-falling. Reading ancient texts might feel like navigating a complex, high-stakes descent, but if you understand the genre, use the right tools, and refuse to skip the steps, you will find that the blueprint waiting for you is exactly what you need to finally land safely and start building. Keep diving deep.